You are listening to Awake in Relationship, a podcast about intimacy, community, and culture in a time of great change, with Silas Rose.
Hello friends, my name is Silas Rose, and this is Awake in Relationship. It's Valentine's Day, so I want to offer something special on the topic of love. In this crazy, corporeal world that we live in, there are few things more elusive or harder to render in words than love. How do we talk about or describe the invisible space between two lovers or two old friends? There's a certain electricity or magnetism in that space that we yearn for. But for many reasons, it can be hard to find. Even in the context of a long-term relationship, it's possible to hide our true vulnerability and desires, possibly for decades. When we avoid having the important and sometimes risky conversations with the people we love, we miss a precious opportunity to experience deeper intimacy and healing in relationship. In this episode, I welcome Topaz Adizes, an Emmy Award-winning director, an experienced design architect, and the author of the 12 Questions for Love, a guide to intimate conversations and deeper relationships. Since 2014, Topaz has been documenting intimate conversations in an award-winning series called The And, which has been viewed by millions online. In this chat, Topaz shares some of the wisdom gleaned from over 10 years of holding space for life-changing conversations. We also discuss the architecture of questions that illuminate and heal, and how to hold a container for love, even in the midst of conflict. If there's a conversation that you've been putting off for a while, I think you'll enjoy this episode. Topaz Adizes, welcome to Awake in Relationship.
Good to be here. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Excited to have this conversation with you.
Likewise. So, my first impression of you is that you are a prolific creator, in the sense that you are, of course, a filmmaker. You write books. You just authored a new book. And you're also getting into podcasting. So my first question is, when do you sleep?
We got to add to the list. I have a 4-year-old son and a 1-year-old daughter.
Wow.
So it's sleep is not consistent. I'm a really good sleeper. All my friends will tell you that probably one of my super skills is I can sleep anywhere and in 7 seconds. So wherever I could get some shut eye, I will. And sometimes I get shut eye when, like, whether it was in school in class or holding a boom pole on a shoot in a documentary film, just wherever I can.
I'm jealous. That's great. So it'd be interesting just for you to introduce yourself. And I'm particularly interested in, you describe yourself as an experienced design architect. What is that?
It's funny how we give ourselves different names. Most of my career earlier, the first 15, 20 years was as a filmmaker. And then when we launched The Skin Deep, which was an experienced design studio focused on transformative power of human connection, then I start, in order to give myself permission to not just make films, but other things like interactive experiences in the card game and a retreat and all these different things, I came up with Storybreaker. Storybreaker is someone that, we all tell ourselves stories, and then something happens in your life that breaks your story. You've had a number of things you talk about on the site that break your story and that give you the opportunity or force you to create a new story and a new identity. And with that story comes new possibilities. So I call myself a story breaker because that gave me permission to do different things. And now that was 10 years ago. And now I say the last 2-3 years, I've been really questioning what is it underneath that? What is it in the work that I've been exploring in interactive design and creating retreats, or even the and production itself? And I've kind of come to like, it's creating the architecture and design of experiences. It's not just experience design. It's like the architecture of it. What's the physiology? What's the space we move in? What's the approach? It's what are the building blocks? And then on top of that is the design element, and I guess you could say that design and architecture might be redundant, but I think they're somewhat different. So an experienced design architect. But in essence, it's how do you create spaces? How do you create vortexes for people to have certain experiences? And not that your experience, not that you want them to have this experience, but you want to create a space in which they can have certain experiences, a spectrum of experiences.
Right. Creating a container.
A container.
Mm.
Yeah. And that's what I really love. And I think if I look back, making a film, I loved the process of the filmmaking, being on set, because then that is a container right there, and you are shaping the space. And I enjoy that as much as the final product.
Well, you've had a lot of success in your life and your career, including winning an Emmy, which is, I think you definitely are my first Emmy-winning guest.
Cool.
What do you attribute to that success?
Luck. But what's luck? I don't, that's a good question. I work hard. I'm very focused and committed, to sometimes the detriment of my health. There was a period there where I fell into a depression, and it was about 10 years where I couldn't really walk very well. And I got back surgery about 18 months ago, just minimal invasive, but it's just, I remember the day after getting the surgery and going for my first walk without my feet going numb. And I started crying because I thought, well, what kind of human being puts up with that much pain for that long? And I think, and when I say that story, just because I think one part is I'm really tenacious, and I really can like grind it out and do the work and kind of push it through. And so maybe it's like having a vision, but being able to execute a vision. And I didn't really get that till I was about 22 or 3. I moved to New York, and until that point in my life, I always had ideas, but never fully executed. And then I said, I'm executing this short film. I'm going to execute this thing if I have to draw it on a piece of paper and take a picture of it. And I think I've just carried that execution idea. Like, it's have the idea, but see it all the way through. And maybe that's what's been putting me in positions to be applauded. But I don't know. It's a good question. Maybe it's a better question for the people around me who I don't know.
Who put up with you?
Yeah, who put up with me? Exactly.
You mentioned, that moving to New York in your 20s. In the introduction to the book, you talk about at that period of your life really encountering a crossroads. You've graduated, and you actually acknowledge that you have a lot of freedom, and you want to use that freedom well. And the choice is really to kind of, sort of follow your peers into the corporate world, or hit the open road with a video camera. Why did you choose the latter?
Because I knew I was lucky. I knew that I was very fortunate. I was a white male. I was 1999, 2000. I was a white male who was healthy, whose parents were healthy, but a college degree with no student debt. And I was very fortunate. And I said, wow, I am like 0.0001% of the population globally that has this luxury to choose and this freedom to choose. I better not I better not effing take it for granted. And I used the F word there because it was serious. It was like, let's not mess around. This is a luxury, and it comes with responsibility. And that responsibility is to make the most of this journey I have on the world in the physical plane as a soul. So I'm not going to go follow the zombie mode into making money, into being zombie mode for what? I need to go find how I can contribute to my community. And whatever the community was, it could be my block, it could be the street, it could be the world, it could be the city. I don't know. But I was like, I need to contribute, and I need to find out the best way, the most unique way that I can contribute. And I need to do that by following my passion. And I bought a one-way ticket to Australia. And this is what was it? Like, what was the thing that everyone was worried about? What was it called?
Y2K.
Remember? Y2K. Remember Y2K?
Yeah.
It was like the biggest fear. And I was like, if Y2K hits and everything falls apart, at least I'll be in Australia. And I was heading to the Marquesas Islands. So I read this book by Paul Thoreau and I loved it. And I wanted to be anyways. That's why I was just, I was fortunate. I just shouldn't take it for granted. And I should just find my way to contribute to community, whatever that meant, through pursuing my passions and turning them into gifts.
You eventually turn your lens on relationships. What was it about that topic that really gravitated you?
It's kind of, I was in the book where I talk about that seed of pain was laid very young, when I was basically like, my experience was moderating and mediating my parents' divorce at a very young age, which was very passionate and tumultuous. And there's a lot of fighting between all, it was intense, very intense for a 3-year-old, 4-year-old. And I think that laid the seed for an exploration of what does it mean to be connected? What does it mean to be intimate? And I always had that in me. And then that seed of pain turned into a hunger to search for it. And so I was always interested in it. And even when I was just traveling the country, in Australia and India and Europe with the camera, I was talking to people. So I was just really interested in trying to find something below the surface. And I realized that the camera was that bridge, the bridge into other people's worlds that they would open up, that they wouldn't otherwise open up without the camera. And so that's why I was kind of inspired to play with filmmaking as a skill set to explore other people's humanity. And then that then ended up into like, one thing led to another, and then use that skill set to do which is the Emmy Award-winning experience, which explores the space between. And so that's how it got me to that project, which I've been doing for the last 10 years.
Yeah, which has been really viewed by millions of people, which is incredible. What is the format that is so magnetizing? What draws people to that?
Well, it illuminates the space between. I think about two magnets. I usually have an example of two magnets where you have two magnets in your hand and you bring them together. You could feel the magnetism, the pull, and you could flip one around so that they're pushing against each other. You can feel it in your hand, but when you look between them, you see nothing. But you feel it. And that energy exists between all of us. So what if I could take a little bit of powder and sprinkle it between the connections between all of us that we have, and share that connection, illuminate the threads that bind us, that connect us. And so that's what the and is, because the and, we bring two people together in a room. We have them facing each other with a little coffee table between them, or a little bench at knee height. And we put questions that we custom make for them. And they sit in front of each other and they ask each other these questions. And we've done this for the last 10 years, over 1,200 conversations. They're on YouTube. And they're asking each other incredible questions. And that's part of what the book is. How do you make quality conversations? And secondly, how do you create the space? And when you put that together, you're creating the space for cathartic conversation, which will deepen your relationships. And so the and films it with two cameras that are close up. So you're seeing both faces at the same time, and a wide shot, kind of, so you see both in profile. But a very minimal, you always see both faces at the same time in a bi-panel. And what that does is it elevates the position of the listener on an equal standing as that of the speaker. And if you think about all of the content we watch, films, TV, and even on social media, you're always seeing the person talking. You're never also seeing the person listening at the same time. The listener is not granted the same amount of importance, or gravitas as that of the speaker, which I think bodes well for, look at the world we're in now. Everyone's shouting at each other and no one's really listening to each other. And so in the end, you're always seeing both people at the same time. And that's when you A father asks a son, "Son, what do you think is the hardest thing for me being your father?" And the son has to answer. And before they even talk, you see them both processing what they think they're going to say, what the father thinks the son will say, the son thinking what he's going to say. And you, in that space, you're illuminating the space between. And us as a viewer get to feel that. I have a friend who said, there's reality TV, Topaz, and what you have is reality of feeling. That's what you're capturing here. And I invite our audience members, if they want to have a digital dose of humanity, because right now social media, fear and fury is spreading 6 to 7 times faster than anything else on the internet, right? With the algorithms, but we see ourselves as a corner of the internet where we're offering digital doses of humanity. And what we do that is by sharing, illuminating the connection, the shared connection between us all through conversation. So that's what the end is. In 10 years, 1,200 pairs, learned a lot. It's been a beautiful journey. And now we're in year 11. So on we go.
Well, I definitely watched a few episodes, and it's remarkably intimate and at times kind of painful to watch. Like I sort of felt a bit uncomfortable in some of the conversations because people are sharing so openly. Why do you think people are so open on the end?
Well, one is because we create the container, and the container is we don't say action. We don't have people in the crew that are about themselves, right? So that when you walk in, you don't get hair and makeup. You don't get action. You don't have people yelling, saying, "Okay, here we go. All right, sit down, queue up." The experience starts from just our response on emails to the experience at the end, starts from them walking in to the space before they even, meaning the producers are coming into the space after they park their cars, to then walking into where the cameras are set up. And I think ultimately, there's a lot of little, tricks we should do. Like we make sure that whoever's filming, there's no, people speaking to each other don't see a camera person behind the person they're speaking to. So there's no one in their eye line, if you will. And so then kind of create this little envelope of space. And then the question comes up. And the questions are so well constructed and so powerful that, regardless of what you're thinking about, when your best friend, your partner, your wife, your grandpa, your son looks at you and says, "Why do you love me?" Or "What are you hesitant to ask me?" Or "What is the biggest challenge in our relationship right now? And what do you think it's teaching us?" Or what was the worst fight we had? And what did it teach you about loving me? When you're asked that question by someone you care about, you have a connection with, you all of a sudden are more interested in answering that question than anything around you. And because the space around you is quite calm and peaceful and it's not noisy and it's not moving, you can really focus into the person who's asking you the question. So the question kind of sets them up to have this conversation. And that's why and then obviously we structure the architecture of the questions, both the way they're written, but also in the sequence sets it up so that we can actually drop in deep to places of gravitas, of profundity, of real vulnerability. And so that's why I think it works.
The book you just written, The 12 Questions for Love, really harvests a lot of learning from your experience of witnessing all these amazing conversations. And, you say you're an experienced design architect. What is the architecture of a good question?
So in the context of a relationship, a good question has 5 parts, in my opinion. One is, let's start with the easy one. Don't make it binary. Do you love me? Yes, no, done. Are you angry at me? Yes, no, done. I mean, we're not talking, it's like anything that leads to a yes, no does not invite exploration, does not invite a conversation. So that's one. Second, another one is, and this is so often missed, but I think asking a question that acknowledges the relationship. That's a connective question. What I mean by that is if someone comes in and says, "What are you scared of?" If I ask you that and your father asks you that and your, the waiter asks you that, you're going to answer that in the same way. I'm scared of snakes. I'm scared of the apocalypse. But if I ask you, What do you think we're both scared of? That question acknowledges our relationship. You're going to answer that differently than when I ask it, than if your father asks it, than if the waiter asks it. That question acknowledges the person asking. It acknowledges the relationship. So having that element in the question is a great way to pull the thread of your relationship, because now both of us are interested in the conversation. I'm interested in what you're going to say because it's also a reflection of me. It's a reflection of us. Third part is have questions that don't have an agenda, right? Because if you ask, why are you always so angry? Well, that's immediately a person's going to react defensively. Offering a question as a gift versus an agenda, or instead of pointing your finger with your question, by basically metaphorically like pointing a finger at someone with your question, offer them an open hand. It's a lot easier to shake the open hand than to shake a finger. Fourth one would be make it constructive. Our minds are built to protect us, but our hearts are built to connect us. And if you ask a question, why do we fight so much? Your mind that's built to protect you is going to come up with it's going to come up with the reasons why we fight so much. Whatever you ask the brain, it's going to find answers to. It's like you throw a stick and the dog will chase the stick wherever you throw it. So if you throw it into the mud, it'll go into the mud. If you throw it up on the grass, it'll go up on the grass. We should be very conscientious about where we're throwing the stick. The stick is the question. The dog is chasing it, is the mind. So why do we fight so much? Well, that's throwing it. Okay. What about, what's our biggest disagreement and what is it teaching us? How does conflict make us better? Right? You're asking a different question. You're throwing the stick in a different spot. And then last and final is, if you can ask things that connect two different ideas, it's great. Also, or a question that puts someone in someone else's shoes. So two different ideas. What does earning money cost you? What's your favorite memory from your worst relationship? Or how does conflict make us better? We don't often think about conflict making us better. Or for businesses, I say, what's one value, in the organization, what's one value we do not share with our clients? So, asking questions that put two different ideas that don't often come together in the same question, such that your mind is going to find what is the answer to that. And that's the space of creating like a new pattern in the head, in the mind, right? And then in terms of putting yourself in each other's shoes, that's really helpful because that helps create a sense of compassion or empathy.
How do you want people to use this book?
Yeah. Well, the book I think is great because it's a book that gives you an experience. On a very prescriptive level, ask these 12 questions with anyone you're intimate with, whether it's your partner, your best friend, a family member, a sibling, whoever you're intimate with, not romantic, doesn't have to be romantically. And just ask these 12 questions. And you're going to have a cathartic conversation, arguably one that will forever change that relationship, only because this much more conscientiousness was brought to it by asking these questions. It's the questions themselves, and it's the structure of the questions in terms of, the order, the sequence. And then underlying that is, if you read through the book, you see, why does this work? And so then it's, someone else was talking about, you can watch a basketball game or a sports game. You can watch a game, a sports game, a basketball game, let's say, but not know how to dribble, not know how to shoot, but you can watch it and you can enjoy it. Or you can also come learn how to dribble, learn how to shoot, and you can actually play it. And this book is giving people the tools for how to play so they can learn how to ask questions, learn how to create the space to step into it, and learn how to listen or bring a different type of listening, what I call deep listening, to the conversation, so that you learn how to ride the bike. You learn how to play basketball and be on the court of the relationship, of deepening the relationships in your life. Because ultimately, we're souls bouncing around, bouncing off each other, having these physical experiences. And what better way? Well, there's a number of ways. We don't just have to talk, but being in each other's presence and reflecting to each other this experience we have called life and walking through it in relationship is a beautiful way to amplify the experience of what it means to be alive, or what it feels to be alive. And so my hope is that this book gives you a toolkit, a tool, like the blueprint for how to have cathartic conversations.
I wish we had time to go through the 12 questions, independently, because, they are very deep. And, some of them just are basically, especially at the beginning, really just about inviting curiosity. But when you get into kind of the meat of it, they can be quite probing and, potentially emotionally charged. If someone gets to that stage in the book and are having these kind of really deep personal questions and conflict arises, well, what do you advise for managing that?
First, I advise slowing down and breathing. And when you feel discomfort, that's an indication that growth is on its way. Because the path to growth is lit by discomfort. It's lit by fear. So pursue discomfort and fear wherever you see them. Because on the flip side, beyond that is growth. I also think we need to make a very clear distinction between safety and discomfort. Just because you're uncomfortable does not mean you're not safe. Just because you're comfortable doesn't mean that you're safe too, right? So if you are in a safe relationship that you feel is not toxic, that you feel that there's a mutual trust and respect, that you feel that we are on a journey together, we acknowledge that, we take responsibility for our feelings, for our actions, for our communication, and you feel that, look, we can face uncomfortable things together, because then lean into the discomfort. If you feel that it's safe on that, you have the basis of safety, then it's great to lean into as much discomfort as possible in your relationships, because on the flip side of that is more resiliency, is more fulfilling, right? It's a more vital relationship. And ultimately, it's just amplifying your experience of what it means to be human. Second, I think another one is when the conflict comes up, it's like, we don't have to have conversations that resolve things immediately. You don't have to win. What kind of conversations are we having? And the ones I'm offering in the book are exploratory ones, are deepening ones. They're not ones that we're going to discuss, we're going to come to a solution, we're going to execute it. It's a different conversation. Or if you need to get to the execution part, just have a clear demarcation. We're going to explore, we're going to discuss, we're going to feel, okay. And then we're going to do something that demarcates that we're moving into the next phase of our conversation, which is now we need to make a decision. But this place of demarcation, you don't need to win. You don't need to be right. You just need to be present in the space. Even if a couple, one of the rules in the book is that playing the game, is that you don't have to answer any question you don't want. You earn the right to pass by looking the other person in the eye for 10 seconds. Or just being silent for 10 seconds and saying pass. There's a lot there in that moment of silence. The fact that we can sit in discomfort together, the fact that I can hear your opinion of something that where I can improve or whatnot, the fact that we're asking the question, even if we don't answer it, but we're sitting in that discomfort, that means that we're able to hold a space together in this relationship. And oftentimes when people go to therapy, which can be very helpful sometimes, the person who holds a space and makes the rules is the therapist. Oftentimes they're asking the question. Right? So that's not enabling the couple or whoever's in the therapy to practice at holding the space themselves. And in this case, where there is no therapist, and by the way, I'm not a trained therapist, so this comes from 10 years of trial and error practice and observations. Take it or leave it. But by being in the space where you and someone else in your relationship are asking these questions and sit in that space, at the very least, you guys are practicing sitting in discomfort, which is an aspect of resiliency. And we don't have to come to solutions. We could just practice feeling. We could practice being. That's incredibly valuable. Conversations.
In wrapping up, I want to focus in on something you already mentioned, which is this great vision of creating essentially a wiki or archive of human relationships. Why is that important now?
So for a long time, and we're continuing, we have the library of all these conversations. Incredible. And you can have access to other people's experiences and learn for yourself and realize that A, I'm not the only one. and B, there's hope.
Hmm.
There's multiple ways to tackle this. That's incredibly useful. Also, it's incredibly useful as a tool of advice, right? I mean, if you think about any type of advice you've ever given or received in your life, it's always based on someone's actual experience. Someone actually lived that experience. Whether you read it in a book or you heard it on a documentary or someone told you, oh, you go try this, try meditation, try that. It worked for me. It worked for my friend. Someone had to do it to that. No one just makes something up from nowhere and says, try this. Well, why? Because I think it should work. It's bad. And so that means that the quality of advice you get is commensurate to the number of people or things that people have experienced that you have access to, the books, the films you watch, the conversations, what you have access to. We are making these over 1,200 relationships, great breadth and scope available to you. That's giving you a greater tool to give you better lived experience that could offer you advice in your own journey of life. And I think that is a beautiful tool to leave for future generations. I mean, for present generations, but also future generations. So they can see how humanity has, the emotional experience of being human is shifting, especially in this pivotal age of time, right? Where now, the internet, social media, AI, blockchain, like all these things are changing the way we're relating to one another. And it's nice to, and in 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 years, when my grandkids look back, they'll have this incredible tool to see at least what was humanity experiencing at the turn of the century, the year of the great pandemic. What were people feeling? How did they communicate? So there's both like a short-term tool for now, but also a long-term archival value to this project. And that's why it inspires me to create this library of human connection, human relationships.
Well, I'm really enjoying this conversation. Thank you so much. And people want to connect more with your work or get the book, where can they go?
Skindeep.com and all our social media, mostly, we're on all the social media channels, the Skin Deep. My personal website's topazadizes.com. But all our products, the books, the content, it's just the Skin Deep. That's a great way to find us.
Awesome. Well, I hope we can connect again.
Thank you, Silas. I really appreciate your time, your energy, especially. Thank you.
If you want to learn more about Topaz or get a copy of his book, The 10 Questions for Love, head over to theskindeep.com. You can also check out the show notes and transcripts at awakenrelationship.com. If you enjoyed this episode, and I hope you did, I'd really love to ask a favor. It would be wonderful and deeply appreciated if you took a moment and left a quick review on Apple or Spotify or wherever you listen to podcasts. This really helps with the organic reach of the show. And of course, don't forget to hit subscribe. I can be found on Instagram, Substack, or LinkedIn. Send me a message. I love hearing from my audience. And I really love getting suggestions for future guests or topics. If you made it this far into the episode, dear listener, thank you so much for lending me your ear. Till next time, stay connected.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Awake in Relationship. If you liked what you heard, please click subscribe to get the latest show delivered fresh to your device or sign up for our newsletter at awakeinrelationship.com. Sharing is caring.